I don't know why you wouldn't want to tune into this game number one. And I think Georgia has the advantage. Georgia mollywhopped Texas the first time around, but also we've seen Georgia show some weakness down the stretch. This is a different Texas team now, I think. And if you look again at how that first game went, Georgia took advantage. It was Texas's fault, but they got the advantage of starting a lot of drives deep in Texas territory. I don't think that happens again. Texas tends to play better on the road, and this will be a road environment because this game is in Atlanta. These two defenses are rock solid. Man, I think I'd look at the under in a big way. The total is 48 and a hook. That seems high for these two defenses. So I think, if we're just being honest, this could be a national title game. Of all of the matchups here, which one looks most like a potential national title game? It's Texas and Georgia. So I'm biased, but man, I cannot wait to watch this game. I think it's going to be great.
Let me ask you something. Do you think that some of these championship games mean any less because it feels like Texas and Georgia are going to be in the college football playoff regardless? Does it not? Does that take anything away from this?
I don't think so. I think that I would have said before the season that, okay, expanding this playoff maybe takes away from the regular season. Instead, I don't think that's been the case at all, because now you have more teams who are in the mix. And yeah, there's a possibility that you could lose your conference championship game and be out. So that's kind of a new thing. But ultimately, we wouldn't have this many teams eligible in the first place if the playoff had not expanded. So I don't think it takes away from it at all. At the end of the day, it's about winning in college football. And there is a bit of a paradox here, right? Okay, what if you lose your conference championship game, but you don't get to play in the college football playoff? Well, that probably would have been the case before when we were talking about 4 teams in the playoff, right? So you wouldn't have had a shot anyway. So now it's just because the field has expanded. At the end of the day, this could be 12 teams. This could be 24 teams. There's always going to be an argument for the teams right on the fringe, win or lose, in whatever game it is at the end of the season. It's like that in college basketball. We're seeing that now in college football. I think it's great for the sport. So I don't think it takes away. I think it just adds to the intrigue.
I think both of these teams, especially for the SEC championship, and especially because Texas is new, like it still definitely means something to win the SEC title game. As far as the committee goes, I think they've gone on the record saying that they're not going to punish teams that lose in their conference championship games too much because, it's an added, game to their schedule, and they're not going to punish them for playing a quality opponent. But they have said that they might be rewarding the winners of these championship games with maybe some higher seedings. So now I'm going to ask you, which team can gain the most with a win in their conference championship game?
It's Boise State, because Boise State, if they win, is probably going to get a bye. Boise State will probably be the 4 seed. Now, here's the thing. This is where there's more of a risk reward in the Mountain West game than any other, right? Because if Boise State loses to UNLV, they drop in a big way. If Texas loses to Georgia, they're not going to drop too much, because that's not going to be considered a bad loss. Boise State at home, by the way, this is not a neutral site game. Boise State at home losing to the Rebels will drop Boise State in a significant manner. But if Boise State wins, all of a sudden you're talking about a 4 seed and a first-round bye. So the Broncos have a ton to gain by winning and a ton to lose if they somehow don't come out on top here. So oddly enough, I think it's the Mountain West title game that is interesting, or the most interesting from that perspective.
It also feels like if they get a first-round bye, which obviously is a big advantage, but then playing at home at Boise State, that's a long way for a lot of these teams.
Yeah.
I feel like that is a very good home field advantage. And plus, couldn't weather be a factor? That's outdoors, right? Especially this time of year. And I think that's a hot topic. After we've seen a lot of these NFL games kind of changed by the weather outcomes, with the snow.
Yeah.
If you have some of these northern teams that get home field advantage and we get some sort of weather element, do you think the SEC teams will be at a disadvantage?
Maybe. Maybe. I also think, and this is probably not fair, that SEC teams are significantly better than Boise State. Now, I could be wrong. Look, Boise State gave Oregon all it wanted earlier in the season. So maybe I'm not giving the Broncos enough credit here. And I love Boise State. As you know, I worked in Boise. I covered the Broncos. That fan base is great. The blue turf is awesome. So I have a soft spot in my heart for the Broncos. But maybe this is a better way to put it. The SEC teams are more battle-tested, right? Because it's just a week in, week out grind. That's not necessarily what Boise State has faced in the Mountain West when they're taking on San Jose State or Wyoming, whoever it may be. They can play. But, yeah, is it an advantage for Boise State if you have to go to Boise and you have to play there on the blue turf, especially late December? It does get cold. It could snow. How many SEC teams are used to playing in the snow? None. I think I said earlier this year that Kentucky, when they played Texas, that was the farthest west that the Kentucky football team had ever played. Texas, Austin, Texas. So these SEC teams, unless it's maybe the Rose Bowl or something like that or some sort of bowl game out west, they're not accustomed to doing that. So, yeah, that would be an advantage for the Broncos, no question.
I think what makes me nervous for you is that, do you think the weather elements take away good defenses? Because we've seen that in the NFL. You know, it's almost harder for the defenses to stand their ground and to like pivot on a dime when there's snow. And all of this, you know, could be for nothing. Maybe it's actually nice weather the week that these teams get these games. And maybe it's not going to be an issue. It's just one of those little factors that's going to be different. You know, one of those little nuances that maybe plays a role. So it's kind of fun to talk about. Let me ask you real quick about SMU. Do you think they can change some opinions with a big win in the ACC championship game? Because it feels like a team that's flown under the radar for most of the year.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the sabotage factor with SMU is their schedule isn't great. They haven't played a lot of teams. And Clemson is a good passing team with Kate Klubnik, and the Mustangs aren't necessarily very good at defending the pass. But I think even though SMU is the favorite here, there's no question they will use that to their advantage, like that motivational factor. Look, nobody is paying attention to us. And for them to beat Clemson and win the ACC title in their first year in the conference, they're the one. Clemson has been here. This is old hat for them, not for SMU. That motivation, I think, will play a big part for the Mustangs. So what's going to happen between UNLV and the Boise State Broncos?
Yeah, guys, this is going to be a good one on Friday night, and it's one of those conference championship games that's played on campus, right? Like all these Power Four are obviously at NFL stadiums, they're neutral sites. This one's going to be at Boise on the blue turf. So, you know, you see a spread like that, and pretty much if these two teams were playing on a neutral, it'd be close to a pick-em, and I think that would surprise a lot of people because of the season that Boise's having, the season that Ashton Genty's having, obviously. And like you said, Jenks, I mean, Boise's got a ton to lose. Not only if they lose this game are they going to be out of the playoff, but also they'll miss their opportunity to likely get one of those top 4 seeds and get a bye into the quarterfinals. So just a huge game for them. I kind of think this is a de facto playoff game, guys. I think the winner of this game is going to the playoff. And that's why UNLV is only a 4-point dog, because they're really good and they're having a great season and their defense is solid. These two teams played earlier this season. UNLV did as good a job as any team at kind of containing Genty, and I think they're going to do the same thing. So it's going to be one of those games that comes right down to the wire. Boise really hasn't been that impressive the last 4 or 5 weeks. They've kind of just been skating by, and if they play the kind of game that they've been playing here as of late, they're going to get beat. So it's going to be close. These Mountain West title games throughout the years have normally been really tight, especially the ones that Boise has been involved in. I think this one's going to be another close game. I don't know if Boise loses outright, but I'll certainly take the points with UNLV. This game will be a field goal. I like the Rebels.
Yeah, the first installment was a good one as well. Boise State winning that one 29-24. All right, let's go to where it just means more. The SEC championship game, the big one of the weekend for a lot of people around here. Cough, cough, Jenks, Georgia and Texas squaring off. How does this one go, PJ?
Yeah, guys, nobody on this show will be interested in this game, that's for sure. It's gonna be good, right? We get a rematch of the game earlier on in the year in Austin, and as you guys know, we were picking that game earlier in the season. I like Georgia, and the reason being you don't get Georgia very often as underdogs. And when Kirby Smart gets to tell his team for a week that nobody thinks they're any good and that they're an underdog to a team that they beat in their house, I kind of like Georgia in that game, right? I think the case for Texas this week, a lot of people will be saying it's tough to beat a team 2 times. Obviously, recency bias. Texas just had the great win in College Station. Georgia should have lost to Georgia Tech in that crazy 8 overtime game. I just think this is one of those games, guys, where it's a bad matchup for Texas. Like, that game where those two teams played didn't look like it was a fluke to me. Georgia dominated that thing from the start, and it really wasn't all that close. If you don't have a quarterback that's all that mobile against Georgia and can create and make plays like a Haynes King did for Georgia Tech, like a Jalen Milroe did for Bama, I think it's tough to move the ball. And Texas's offense, for all the playmakers that they have on that side of the ball, they have really not been all that great the last 4 or 5 weeks. Ewers is not healthy, and I think that's hurting them on that side of the ball. So kind of like an under in this game too, just because of how good Texas's defense has been. I think they'll continue to be. I think Georgia will limit Texas's offense as well. So I like the under, and I like Georgia to get another win over Texas. I would take Georgia outright, plus 120.
Does James Franklin continue to James Franklin, or do the Nitany Lions and Double D have a chance here?
You know, I think this is going to be a better game than people think. God, am I going to come on this show and give out a pick against Texas and Penn State? That would really be good for me, wouldn't I? I like Penn State, though.
You would not be invited back.
No, I would not. I would not. I like Penn State, though, guys, in the first half, plus 2.5. I've gone back and looked at Oregon in some of the big games this season when they played Ohio State, when they played Wisconsin. Ohio State, they were only up 1 at half. Wisconsin, they were trailing in that game. So they've been kind of slow starters in these big games, and then they make adjustments. They go into the locker room and they figure it out. That Boise State game too earlier in the year, they were down 20-14 at half. So Jenks said it. The narrative around Penn State, James Franklin, can he win one of these big games? That's why I don't want to get involved in the full game spread in all 60 minutes. I think Penn State's going to have a good game plan, though. I think they can hang around and keep it close, especially in the first half. So I'll take Penn State plus 2.5 to keep it close against Oregon.
All right, so we have a couple minutes left. How about we go to the ACC? Clemson and SMU. It feels like SMU has been flying under the radar for most of the season, but it feels like they deserve some respect. This line's pretty tight, though. I believe it's 3.5. Or no, that's the Oregon game. 2.5. SMU favored by 2.5. Which way are you leaning on this one?
I like SMU. I'd probably just take a money line at minus 135. Guys, this was crazy. So the opener in this game was Clemson minus 2.5, and then that went away really quick. It was a pick 'em, and then overnight, heading into Monday, you saw even more SMU money come in. And they're 2.5-point favorites. I get it why Clemson over the favorite, right? It's Clemson. They've been in the ACC championship a million times. You kind of know that Dabo will get them ready for a game like this. SMU's first year in the ACC. They've had a good year, but they haven't really beaten anybody all that good. But I just think SMU's better. And you look at Clemson this season, they haven't had that difficult to schedule. And the 3 best teams that they've played, they've lost to. They lost to Georgia, Louisville, and South Carolina on Saturday. So Clemson hasn't really beaten that many good teams. And SMU's a solid team. They can really score. They got a good defense, too. So I like SMU to win the game. And I would just take a minus 135. I don't know if SMU is a team that could make noise in the playoff, but they're solid. They got playmakers on offense. I think they'll get the job done against Clemson.